Here's another unsolicited tip. Even if you're uncorporated, there's nothing to stop you from put a bucket and ask people to throw cash in there, because as organizers, I know what you're out of pocket, and the biggest investment I tell people to make, go to Costco, get a folding table, go to Staples, or order clipboards online. Those are going to be your friends. So the number one, I feel like Family Feud, the number one request was how to incorporate corporate structure, how do you get insurance. So we have a woman who Rodney tried to get fired here today, and Saily, see, I screwed it up. I rehearsed. Saily Avelenda, who's close enough. God, I was rehearsing all day. Saily Avelenda.
Close enough. So I get to do the fun presentation, the nuts and bolts of, you guys all get to do the issue advocacy and the organizing, and I get to tell you the lawyer side of what you're doing. So just to baseline, who's here? Are there any lawyers in the group here? I see a couple of hands, okay. And how many of you belong to groups that are already incorporated or have filed? Okay, not a lot. Hi, Elizabeth, yes. So when I started advising Action Together and NJ11th for Change, the question I posed to both groups, and the questions that I would challenge you to pose to your groups, is who do we want to be? And what I mean by that is we all know why we're here. We have a goal individually as a group, but how you accomplish that goal and how you set about to do that's going to really determine whether and how you incorporate your organizations. So there's a difference between being an issue-based group. There's a difference between that type of group and a group that is going to engage in partisan political activity. And then there is the fundraising aspect of what we're all trying to do. So you have to ask yourselves really specific questions. Am I going to focus my energy on notifying and educating an electorate on an issue? Am I going to focus on educating that electorate on an issue in the hopes of unseating a sitting member of Congress or having another member of Congress elected? Am I going to do all of those things just on a shoestring budget, or do I want significant amounts of cash in play? So asking yourselves those questions, you're going to find that you're probably going to have some very interesting discussions in your groups, but it's key. NJ11th for Change and Action Together New Jersey both become incorporated entities, and I recommended this to the groups specifically because there are some legal issues, liability issues that you would want to consider, but also from a practical perspective. You want to be able to fundraise, you want to be able to open up a bank account, you want to be able to procure insurance if you're going to be doing things like holding town halls or having events or taking up, not necessarily, perhaps this church, I'm not sure if they would ask for insurance, but venues are going to ask you for these things, and you're going to have to find a way to, if you're not incorporated, it's a little bit more of a ad hoc, who's got insurance, or who can call their insurance broker and get the insurance put on their personal policy. And nobody really wants to incur personal liability, so I've recommended, and I would encourage you to speak to your own attorneys, that incorporation is probably a good way to go if you're going to really want to formalize and focus your energy in that way. That doesn't mean that it's right for everyone, but it's a really good first step to get a lot of the mechanics in place that you're going to need in order to do all the wonderful things that you guys, the actions and the events and all of that. So what are the different models that we would want? I think Marcia was talking about, 501c3s, 501c4s, and then there's PACs. There's a lot of terminology out there. I think you may have received a handout. If you didn't, I have a set. So what the handout shows is just the differences between the different types of tax models and entity models out there. So there's a couple of things. First, you would want to register with the state of New Jersey as a nonprofit entity. And that essentially creates a shell that absorbs the liability away from the individuals. But that's just the first preliminary step. That's almost a baseline step. That's a $75 filing. You need 3 trustees, which are essentially directors, and a registered agent. All of that information is public, so if they search the name of your entity, you'll find these are the 3 trustees that have filed. This is your registered agent, and your registered agent is someone who accepts service on any official documentation. But beyond that, once you decide, if you decide to go that way, then you're going to want to talk about the money part of this. How are you collecting your money and what are you using it for? And traditionally, you'll see things like disclaimers that say, oh, I'm a 501c3 organization. Does anybody here, are you guys all familiar? Is anyone here not familiar with any of those terms? Okay, good. So from a baseline perspective, you know a 501c3 is essentially an issue type organization that collects fundraisers in a non-partisan way. And you know, you'll find American Red Cross, I believe, is one. Planned Parenthood has an arm that is 501c3. So the next type of organization that's very similar is a 501c4. Now for most of us, that's probably going to be where we live. And for that, you're going to want, it's a different tax filing, but it's essentially telling the federal government, I am going to be collecting money and using them in a specific way as a social or civic organization, but I'm also allowed to do partisan activities. Now, those are legal terms, so I can sit here and tell you what sounds like, for you it all may sound like it's all politics, it's all political activity, but it's really not in the eyes of the law. So a partisan activity really is when you are essentially working on an election, or you're advocating and you're handling and you're dealing with that as at an election level. You're actually specifically want that individual out of Congress or this individual in Congress, and these are federal terms, but it works the same for the state. So that's going to be a separate option, and those are where most of these action groups are going to lie. But again, it really does come down to who do you guys want to be when you grow up as an organization, and how do you want to accomplish your goals? So while I can tell you that it probably will fit the model, it's the model that I've seen the most traction with in this movement, it may not be right for you. So I would encourage you, again, to consult your own legal counsel on this. Now the third part of this is the money. Everybody wants to raise money. Everybody wants to spend money. How are you going to do that? Because I can't put it in my bank account and then give it to you, give it away. So obviously there are other models that you can take. You can form a PAC, and there are federal PACs, and there's a state PAC. Essentially, where's your focus? Are you dealing with state elections, or are you spending the money in a federal context with a federal election? So NJ11th for Change is filed at the federal PAC level because our member of Congress is federal. So if your organization is dealing with local organizations, you may want to consider a PAC. It is not necessary. It is just, again, another vehicle for you to accomplish the goals that you set for your organization. I will tell you there's a lot of accounting and paperwork. So this is not for the faint of heart. This is not something that you just file, put away in your desk and just forget about. There are a lot of rules that are very specific to all of these different types of organizations. So go to your membership, find out who is an expert in an accounting context, which is not a lawyer. I don't do accounting. Who is a lawyer? Who can help you in those, identify the issues and find a way to work within, again, what the goals of the organization are. It is never a good idea to do the opposite, which is I want to be a 501c4 with a super PAC and then fit that into the model of your organization, because you are losing the power of what you guys want to be by doing it that way. Don't have your lawyer tell you what you want to do. You have to tell them. You have to sit down and say, I want to do X, Y, or Z, and I want to do it this way. They can tell you, you know what, that may not necessarily work, but it's your group. So always be the one coming forward with those types of requests. Do not have them tell you what's the best one. And again, there's a chart that I'm going to leave out there that sets out the differences between 501c3s, 501c4s, federal PAC, state PAC, and super PAC. And super PAC is the big boogeyman word everywhere. It is not a scary thing. Again, a super PAC is a vehicle for you to accomplish what it is you want to do, just as a PAC is, or a 501c4, or a 501c3, whatever that is that you want to accomplish. Okay. Does anybody have questions at this point about any of those specific entities? Because I know it's kind of complicated and I'm giving you the very high level. It's boring, seriously guys. We can all admit it. All right? Everyone can admit it. No? No question?
Lori suggested the 527. I see a reference to that in the note here, but is that not right?
It's a different type of federal political action. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the question was a 527 organization. That's a different type of, it's a federal designation for a political action committee. And depending on what your goals are, that may be, I don't think I specifically laid that one out here, but depending on what your individual group goals are, that may be an option for you. But again, you know, those are federal registrations that you would want to handle. That's actually an IRS designation. I believe you have, if I'm not mistaken, you have the option of filing under the IRS, FEC, or the FEC or the IRS on that one. So again, it's a matter of who you're reporting to, because ultimately what you're going to be doing is reporting to a governmental entity where your funds are coming from and how you're using them. That's really what the PAC designations will do. Yes?
So are there pro bono lawyers that can help with setting up these kinds of things that you can talk to? Or you basically have to go to a paid lawyer to get these kind of...
My experience has been there is an organization called the Pro Bono Partnership, but they handle mostly, and I don't want to speak for them, but when I spoke to the director, she indicated they mostly handle 501c3 filings. They don't necessarily advise on the more political organizational types. They are very technical, and there's a lot of there's just a lot that goes into that, so I don't know that there are any pro bono attorneys at the time, other than myself, because I get paid in cookies. But again, this is one of those areas you would look into your membership, and there are people I'm sure that are willing to help. I mean, my phone number has been given out by Carrie. I'm happy to speak to anyone. And I will say, we also have outside counsel that we have retained, because again, although I'm giving you a really brief overview, there's a lot of reporting that goes into these organizations. And it's not something that I would recommend that you take on your own if you've never done this before. It's really something you need a professional to do. And there are a lot of different rules. For example, a super PAC can't coordinate with candidates. It can't coordinate with political parties. And the rules behind that are very technical and specific. So this is not a do-it-yourself, go to Staples and get a packet and file. This is really something that I would advise everyone to find yourselves someone who specializes in this and have a discussion about it. But bring to the table, again, your specific goals and requests. Yes?
To start a 501c3 or 4, you have to have a minimum budget, and to keep it going, you have to have a minimum amount in your budget. Or the treasury.
I'll repeat the question. For a 501c3 or 4, do you need to have a minimum budget? I don't believe you do. Or operating, I'm sorry? Or startup? No. I don't believe that that's the case. I do know that the PACs do have triggering amounts, so if you do collect a certain amount of money, you would be required to file that. I believe that the 501 entities are triggered by timing, so that you have a certain amount of time after you are operating as one, essentially, to file your documents. But please confirm that, because I don't have that in front of me. Yes? Right there.
So just to clarify, so if you file as a 501c4, you can endorse, but then as soon as you want to raise money to contribute to a specific campaign, that you need to then at least some kind of cap. Is that accurate?
No, you can raise money as a 501c4. Blue Wave, I believe, is a... Marcia, if you want to... Sorry, I keep violating the rules. The question was whether a 501c4 needed a PAC, a separate PAC, in order to collect and spend money.
First of all, this is very difficult. You can spend a certain amount as a 501c4 on candidates, and it can't go over a certain percentage of your budget. So, yes. So, you can give to candidates, you can, but it can't be the majority of your budget, and that you should check with your lawyer, because that has changed twice, the amount, the percentage. I think it's really important to actually confer with a lawyer on that one if you are going to give to candidates. Right. And you cannot, the other thing you can't do is do an advertisement for the candidate. That has to be an independent expenditures, and then you have to get into a PAC for that. And then finally, while you can endorse to your membership or your email list, you are not supposed to, in general, endorse unless you're doing it through volunteers. You can do campaign work as volunteers, non-paid. And in fact, I make sure, this is an important point, that the staff trains rather than actually goes out and does the campaigning, and it's the volunteers that do the campaigning, because I'm not spending money there.
And that just highlights how difficult these questions are, because again, you need to consider each step of what you're doing. There's much more flexibility with how you bring money in with fundraising than there is flexibility with how you're spending your money. Targeted advertising, if that's something your group wants to do, you need to be very, very clear with your advisors, your legal advisors, what that means, because you may not be able to do it within the organizational structure you've chosen. General issue-specific advertising is different than endorsement advertising or targeted advertisement, let's just say. So again, that's why the self-assessment is really the most important part of what you're going to do. How do we want to accomplish this? What do we see our group doing? And don't overcomplicate yourselves. If you can start out simply as a 501c4 organization and learn that you have a lot of money, which is not a bad problem. And then you could determine at that point whether you need a different, a structure such as a PAC in order to manage those expenditures. But Marcia brought up a different point, which I want to kind of jump into. A lot of your legal considerations, although we're talking about the front end of what we're doing, setting yourselves up, getting a bank account, getting insurance. The other part of the handout is going to show you an insurance binder, and I'm just going to touch one point after that. But a lot of it is front end. It's like a setup cost, a setup discussion, but there are a lot of ongoing legal issues that you're going to be addressing as a group every day. Every single day. So I would recommend and I would highly encourage you to get yourselves acquainted with attorneys in your group, to have them as a resource to make these calls. I have had calls I get questions that relate to everything you can possibly imagine, from do we need a permit to do X? Do we have to call the police to do Y? Do we, I was once asked if I needed to have releases for baked goods that we provided to our members of Congress in case someone got sick. That was a question. So there are just a lot of other areas that you will need to really have a lawyer or someone that is really familiar with this process. You're dealing with a volunteer base, and my biggest takeaway for you will be not just setting up your entities how you wish and how you to accomplish your goals, but also you are going to need to train your volunteers to do those things for you. And you want to train them in the way that doesn't get the group or any individual in trouble. So having a really good set of instructions built from a lawyer, and I don't mean to sound dry like you cannot, but just very simple Q&A. What can I do as a volunteer? What can I do on behalf of the group? How do those two things intersect? And when do I need to really reach out to counsel at the group level and find out if I'm doing something wrong? I'm going to just give you an example. A super PAC, we have to collect certain information when we receive funds, because we have to report, and most entities do have to report your donations. We had a lot of volunteers who were really inspired and wanted to have, pass the coffee can type events. And the concern is, after $200, I need to know where the money's coming from, because I have to report it specifically, and I have to report it after $200. So if I have events where you're passing around a coffee can and you're given $10, I have no way of capturing that information from a legal perspective. And that's not something your volunteers are going to really know the nuances of, because in their minds, they're doing something awesome for you, and they're trying to help the cause, but you haven't given them the guidance. So I really would encourage you to have not just the beginning part of your organizational plan in place, but also think ahead to, you know what, we're going to really be doing a lot of rallies, so we're going to be doing a lot of small fundraisers. What issues maybe come up in that area that you would want just some legal advice on, so you can advise your volunteers and no one gets in trouble? Because the worst thing you want to do is, have some poor volunteer who just didn't know what to do, kind of, overstep a line that they didn't know was there. And that goes the same for, yes, what's the question? Sorry.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Kabira, and I'm on the steering committee of Essex Rising. I'm an attorney, and I always feel leery of giving people legal advice that have not retained my services. So I'm wondering if it's in the organization's best interest to retain a lawyer specifically to address the issues that you brought up, such as, what sort of incorporated entity should we be? What sorts of things can volunteers do at this type of event? Things of that sort. Because
Absolutely, no, and that's the biggest takeaway is, but recognizing full well that a lot of these groups don't have the money to pay for a Genova Burns law firm to assist them. That's a lot of money. I do recommend that you probably reach into your group, and I'm sure you would have some expertise to just guide the discussion, but I would absolutely recommend that if you're going to be filing paperwork or making those decisions that are extremely difficult and complicated, it is not to a steering committee vote. It is not to a membership vote, whether or not you do X or Y. It's really in discussion with council. So that's a very good point. The discussions that I'm talking about within your group are really geared towards just pulling out expertise that you don't even know you have in your groups, relying on them to get a discussion going, but the moment you decide to take a next step, by all means, try to retain counsel.
I just wanted to follow up on her question, because I have a variation of that. I was in the art world for a long time. We always found this too, and I'm finding this with our group now, which is even when you have attorneys in your group, they are not totally comfortable talking about incorporation issues. And a lot of attorneys have not done C4, C3 incorporation. So for the risk of coming to you and inundating you constantly, because Saily, your name is flown around, obviously, and your phone numbers are given out. I would wonder.
Goodness gracious.
I don't know more about John Margin with the questions, but I would wonder if there's a New Jersey resource list of.
I have not found, yeah. And that's a really good point. And maybe that's a need that we attorneys in the group might want to fill. Hint, hint, anyone here? But I mean, I'm always very clear when I talk to the individual groups that I'm giving you basic overview parameters, because again, my goal is to just get you familiar with the terminology, the limitations, the ideas, and then you all need to take that. I've never said to anyone, you need to file as this, you need to file as that, and I wouldn't, because that's not what I would expect my lawyer to tell me. We have a discussion, but I will advise you in the sense of giving you just that general overview of what's out there. A lot of people don't even know the options that they have, and that will start your discussions in your group.
And I think one of the things we're trying to do here is that these are some serious issues, but to answer the question, I know when we formed Blue Wave, seems like a different decade, we had lawyers in town who gave us discounted rate, we spoke to them. So within your community, there are people who will help you. It will cost money, and it should be a paid attorney who's doing this, unless you're fortunate enough get someone here at the podium. But it really, but also one of the things, so you don't get too far. Start with something small. You want to be able to open a bank account and get insurance. So start with something small, and a small corporation, and then as you plans, you can always add a PAC. You can always add these other things, and that's really what you want to be able to do. As an organization, you need to have insurance. You need to have a bank account. You need to be able to raise money. And start with those little steps, which I'm not trying to minimize legally, but it's not as complicated as a PAC.
I'm sorry, but I ended up spending $4,000 to change that advice that initially came in that was wrong. Yes, we set up initially, and I hate to say this, I'm just trying to save you money. It was all wrong. And it's really important to get it right. That's what I just want to emphasize. This is something with most attorneys didn't know what they were talking about. They were attorneys, but knowing about a C3 and a C4 and a PAC is very specialized.
Yes.
I just want to say that I spent a lot of money to change it. We had done an ad, and I had to go back and file with ELAC and others and do other things to get it right. And I'm very aware of these issues now. I wish I had had this advice when we started out.
Just like you wouldn't go to a podiatrist for your heart condition, consider going to an attorney if you've had those discussions internally and you've reached the point where you know what you want to do, who you want to be, and how you want to accomplish it. Then you would go to your heart specialist as opposed to the podiatrist of law for that specific issue. And election law and nonprofit law is very specialized. So the fact that your cousin did 3 real estate closings 5 years ago in New Jersey probably isn't going to get you there. You may have a general discussion, but I would really, as Marcia said, once you move past that point and you're at the point where you know fundamentally what your group should be doing and how you want to accomplish that, then you would speak to somebody with the expertise to guide you down those last few steps. This is not something you go to Staples and get a packet and you file, because you probably didn't do, you don't even have that information. You don't even know what you don't know at that point. So I'm encouraging you to go to your groups for the preliminary discussions that kind of we're having right here, the high level, if you haven't had them. But once you get to that point, absolutely, retain your own counsel. It's really important that you do it right, and it can be a costly mistake if you do it incorrectly. But just on the other issue also, the post you've established, there's a lot of other issues. Consider establishing a relationship with a law firm or a set of lawyers that are, would provide pro bono or, reduce fees, because you want to be able to, a lot of the issues I get aren't, I don't have 3 weeks to decide and research. I have, maybe a couple of hours before somebody's marching somewhere that maybe we need a permit. So there's a lot of questions that have to get answered quickly, and you really want the comfort of knowing you can pick up the phone and speak to, an attorney who knows what they're talking about, and say, I'm trying to do this in 3 hours. Can you kind of guide me so no one gets arrested? And that's really what you want to do.
This is a campaign question. I serve on the campaign committee for Lacey Rakowski, turning the LD 21 purple. Right now, we are debating whether or not we either want or need to consider setting up a PAC. Can you give any guidance to that very early in the campaign?
I will speak to you probably offline. I think campaign and PACs are a separate, kind of a separate animal, but I'll speak to you offline. And his question related to I don't know if you caught it on the mic, but his question related to, he's part of a campaign and they want to know whether they, when to set up or how to set up a PAC. So that's a different conversation. I think Chip had a question.
Hi, I was just wondering if you can tell us anything that we absolutely should not do until we incorporate it, so we don't get ourselves in trouble.
Fundraising. Money's a problem. Money will get you in trouble, because once you collect money from other people, it's not your money. Once you collect money from other people, you have to be able to put it somewhere. And then you have to be able to legitimately and legally disperse it however you want. So I would recommend you probably not go that way until you have an idea and you can form a structure.
Now, when you say fundraising, what about just collecting donations at events? Is that considered fundraising?
If you're collecting money from other people, I would, again, without knowing where you're going down the line and whether that or group is going to turn into a PAC and now you've collected money in excess of a certain amount, you want to use that money for advertising or independent expenditures, you can get in trouble because you haven't collected certain information connected with those funds. So I always look at money as the bright line.
That's above a certain amount, or
If it's very low, anyone who gives over $200 to at least
one individual giving $200, not 5 out.
You know, if you're collecting, if you as a volunteer are collecting cash to reimburse for water or things, that's perfectly legal. If you're taking money as an organization, you've crossed the line.
Right.
So you could put a bucket out and have 5 cash. And there are lawyers in your group, there are lawyers in town who know how to do this. They'll do it for reduced fees. And that's how you get started. You know, groups do it all the time. And in terms of some of these other running events and permits and all that, we've been doing it for years, and we certainly could help you wade through what's required or not. So it seems overwhelming. I'm telling you, once you get into it, it really sorts itself pretty quickly.
I think it's overwhelming if you look at it from, I haven't even thought of these issues yet, and I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I think that's overwhelming in that sense. But if you've started to, you've started to hold meetings, and you're starting to show up at rallies, and you're starting to try to maybe create swag for your group, but do you have a logo? I mean, those are things that in pieces you're going to find that you're going to need legal advice at certain points. And it's usually when you're at that point, as Carrie said, when you're collecting money, not just because you want to get reimbursed, hey guys, we had a meeting, everybody can you chip in because, it costs money to put the water out, but you're collecting money and you're representing to your group that you're going to use that money on their behalf for something, then you really want to be careful because you're now entrusted with those funds. And in addition, there could be reporting requirements that you didn't realize because you're not really, you're not aware of it. So that's kind of my bright line with when does it become an issue?
Okay, one more question, then we have to move on. I'm sorry.
Follow-up to that question, and that is if you're passing any additional funds beyond reimbursement onto another nonprofit, can you do that before you're incorporated?
Let's talk offline. I'm trying to, you mean you're collecting money to donate to another organization?
Registered organization.
So I guess in that point, you're still collecting it individually from members for, I'm not sure why you would be doing this.
Well, let's say you're a fundraiser for Planned Parenthood.
Well, then you're fundraising for Planned Parenthood. You're not fundraising for Indivisible Group X or NJ11th for Change. You would have to follow, whatever the Planned Parenthood.
Break down.
Right.
If you collected the money and
for them,
you bank a check for them and gave it to them, you can't do that. If you, which we've done, you collect a Planned Parenthood and someone writes a check to Planned Parenthood or goes on their PayPal account, that's perfectly legal because it's doing under their guise. So, and we do those kind of things all the time. Just, we were talking earlier about collaboration. Talk to these groups because they can send you a lot of resources to help you with those groups. They'll pay for it. If you can do that kind of thing, they'll pay for the permits. They'll pay for your expenses because they're looking to reach out to groups to support them. Anyway, I'm sorry.
We just get Chip because he's got his hand.
Oh, if it's Chip, Chip, we could ask a question.
There are many of us who are progressive attorneys, but we don't know the thorny thicket of super PAC law and 501c3 and 501c4 law. So what I might suggest is maybe that we get together and have a training just for progressive attorneys. So that
Chip, there's an idea. Right.
I'm an accident attorney, and all the time I get asked about forming these types of organizations, and I can't give an honest answer, and I don't want to guide somebody in the wrong direction.
Right.
So
right now, Blue Wave will commit to doing that and getting together next few weeks.
I just want to leave you with one thought. The biggest takeaway I want to give you individually for your groups is you need to build inside your groups a culture of compliance with whatever the rules are that you're subject to. You don't want a group that, you know, doesn't care or doesn't want to identify these rules. It's really important because you want to establish credibility, you want to maintain credibility at all times, you want to be legitimately viewed in the eyes of not just the law, but fellow progressive groups. So the more you establish a culture of compliance within your groups and have your members be really careful that what they're doing is fully compliant at all times, you're going to be much more successful. I mean, I know I get a million emails, but I love the emails that I get from all of my groups that say, can I do this? And I think to myself, you know, it's an easy question, but I'm really happy they keep asking because it tells me that it matters and it's important to them that we always do the right thing and we always present an image that is, present what we are, which is professional and also organized and legitimate and credible.
Great. Thank you, Saily.